Hey everybody, and welcome back to Sweatpants BI. In the last video, we set up most of the DAX measures that we're going to be using in the remainder of our Toy Company Sales Power BI report. In this video, we're going to be setting up 2 more pages in our Power BI tool focused on product performance and store performance for the stores and products in our sales data set. So won't be as much DAX in this video probably, but we definitely will be kind of building on the DAX that we've written so far to come up with some more advanced DAX applications. And of course, we're going to build out 2 great new pages of content for our sales performance report. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump back into Power BI. Now that we have our main 2023 performance report page done, the next thing that we're going to do is use the other tables in our data set to just tell a little bit more about what is going on behind the scenes that might be driving this year-over-year increase in our total revenue. So we're going to create 2 more tabs down here, and one is going to focus on the products table and how products are performing in this sales data set. And the other is going to focus on our stores. Now, before we get building, let's go ahead and bring in a layout for each of these 2 pages. I'm going to hop back over here into our PowerPoint presentation, and I'm not going to do anything fancy. I'm just going to copy and paste 2 new slides, and I'm going to specify that I want to keep the source formatting on both of these. Looks like I'm still stuck with meteors on this one, so let's go ahead and just open up our design settings and hide background graphics. Okay, that's all looking good. And again, we're not going to change up our layout too much. We want every page of our Power BI report to have the same look and feel. We want our users focused on the data, not the aesthetics, not the layout. You know, by and large, we want every single page in our report to have a very similar look and feel. So we're just going to change the title here to Product Performance for our second slide. And our third one, you could probably already guess, is going to be Store Performance. Once we have that done, let's go ahead and save these. I'm going to save a copy. I'm going to save this as yet another SVG or Scalable Vector Graphics format. I'm going to find the folder where my backgrounds are saved. This is going to be background 2, and the other one is going to be background 3. So I'm going to overwrite the practice SVGs that I made earlier. I'm going to head back over to Power BI. I'm going to go over to my canvas settings, and I'm going to add a canvas background for background 02. I'm going to drag this transparency down to 0, and there's my product performance. And I'm going to do the same thing over here for my stores page by going to my canvas background, importing my background 3 SVG, and setting my transparency to 0. So now it's time to start actually digging into our product performance. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is, I know that there are a couple of, very quick bar charts that I'm going to want in this. So I'm going to go ahead and just add a few quick bar charts down here. Looks like I probably need to make these a little bit less wide. Tell you what, I'm actually just going to scrap that idea entirely, and if it's not broken, don't fix it. I'm just going to copy and paste a bar chart that's already been formatted. And I'm going to leave this as year-to-date revenue, but instead of product category, I'm going to go ahead and grab product name over here. That looks great to me. I'll go ahead and drag this down a little bit. And I'm going to copy and paste that. And instead of year-to-date revenue, I'm going to go ahead and just quickly copy this measure. But instead of year-to-date revenue, let's look at year-to-date profit for these different products. And maybe for my last chart, I just want to have year-to-date units sold. Maybe if I were someone in operations, it would be really useful for me to know, how many units of different products are we moving in a year so that I can anticipate future demand. So I'm going to go ahead and space these out a little bit more so that they fit the space that I have on the page here. Really quickly, I'm just going to go through and retitle these. So the first one is now going to be year-to-date revenue by product. The next one is going to be year-to-date profit by product. After that, I've got year-to-date units sold by product. And you'll notice that my color formatting here is still tied to the conditional formatting that I used over here, which is year-to-date revenue. So I'm going to want to go over here just real quickly, head to my visual, head to the bars, my default options, and I'm going to want to change the conditional formatting field from year-to-date revenue to year-to-date profit. That's going to move immediately that green bar to the very top, and I'm going to do the same thing for my year-to-date units sold. I'm going to change that from year-to-date revenue to year-to-date units sold. So you can see I'm moving a lot of barrel of slime, Play-Doh, magic sand. That sounds fun to me. Going to just kind of reshape everything here. And now, what I'm going to use this top space here for is, if you'll recall over here, I don't have product level goals. So there's not a whole lot that I can do with progress towards goal. It wouldn't make sense to compare all of these products against that, 8.5 million, because, we don't have, this goal here can't be allocated to the different products unless we maybe did it by their volume out of 2022. But that's way more complex than we're trying to get into right now. Instead, I'm just going to focus on year-over-year difference. I think this will probably tell us more about, what's going really well in 2023 and maybe where we've lost some ground in 2023 compared to last year. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use this entire space to look at all of the products that we have and look at their year-over-year performance. But before we do that, I really want to look at what that year-over-year performance looks like, because when you're comparing year-over-year numbers and normalizing them into a percentage or a delta, you can end up with some outliers really quickly. Maybe one product is selling exponentially better in 2023 than it was in 2022. Or maybe there's a product that's selling in 2023 that we didn't sell in 2022. It's important to kind of know that stuff before you start visualizing it. So let's go ahead and just grab a table and let's see what this information looks like before we start building. So first, I'm going to just go ahead and drop my product name into my table. And I'm going to go ahead and grab year-to-date revenue. I'm a very visual person. I'm also going to grab previous year-to-date revenue. And let's look at year-over-year difference. And to make our lives easier, let's go ahead and sort this top to bottom. And right out of the gate, you can see over here, we've got some pretty big outliers. Some of these products, we have this magic sand, which we only made $3,500 off of the previous year. In 2023 so far, we've made, almost $870,000 off of it. So that's a gigantic outlier that we're going to have to be able to account for in our visual, or else this is the only thing that users are going to be able to see. So let's go ahead and scroll down to the bottom and see what outliers we might have at the bottom of this sort of sorting that we have going for year-over-year difference. And you can see that there are some products that we have just started selling this year that we were not selling the previous year. So we might have to make some small adjustments to our year-over-year difference formula to account for these. So I'm going to go ahead and head over here, and I'm just going to create a new version of our year-over-year difference formula. I'm going to call it year-over-year difference 2. And I'm going to add just some different logic in this to get rid of these negative 100% values. And the way that this is going to work is I'm going to tell the formula if previous year-to-date revenue equals 0, then let's just not calculate the year-over-year difference. Otherwise, let's go ahead and calculate year-over-year difference as normal. So let's see what happens when I drop this new measure, which I'm going to go ahead very quickly and convert to a percentage and tell it I only want it to return 1 decimal point. And when we put this over here in our table, you'll now notice that those negative 100% are gone. These negative 100% are not particularly meaningful anyway because, we weren't even selling this product the previous year. So that kind of cleans up that part. The outliers, we could easily set some kind of cap on this, but that wouldn't be realistic either. It wouldn't necessarily be realistic to say, if the year-over-year difference is over 150%, let's just call it all 150%. Well, that's not true. Actually, somebody would be very interested to know that this magic sand is suddenly selling gangbusters, or at the very least, maybe take a look at that. So we've gotten rid of some data points that are kind of not really true, or maybe not comparing apples to apples. That's fine. We'll use our year-over-year difference to measure for the visual that we're going to create here, but we're just going to leave everything else the same. Now, because there is such a difference here between, magic sand and color buds, one thing that we might want to do is actually preserve this table over here where it can be referenced. And let's go ahead and do some additional cleaning up on this table. We want to try to fit this table into the smallest amount of space that we can. So let's go ahead and call this last year-to-date revenue. Year-to-date revenue and percent difference. And very quickly, let's just go ahead and format this. The goal of our formatting efforts here is going to be to sort of push all of the information here to sort of the background and really highlight the variations and difference here. So for our column headers, let's just go ahead and format all of our column headers with kind of this dark blue. Let's see, I do actually think that I prefer that. Let's go ahead and turn off. I'm noticing that our background white is still turned on. Let's go ahead and turn that off. Head back to my visual settings. Let's give our column headers a text color that actually stands out. Right now it's kind of a dark gray and no one can read it. So let's go ahead and make those stand out a little bit better. If you're wondering why I keep going back to the DIN font, it's just because I find it very clean, very easy to read, and that is kind of the goal of our data visualization efforts. Just going to go ahead and keep kind of tightening all of this up so that I can scroll down and read everything very, very easily. Next, I'm going to go to my values, and I'm going to pick the same blue for my background colors. I'm going to get rid of my this kind of light blue border up here. Don't need it. And for my grid lines here, it might be useful to, give people a way of sort of reading between these lines very easily. Let's see if I go a little bit darker, how that looks. Let's go ahead and start kind of messing with the color of the text in the table. It's all looking pretty good to me. As a matter of fact, I actually think that we can get away with making our font colors just a little bit lighter here. I'm just kind of playing around with some different options here to see what I can get away with. for now, I think I am actually, whoops. I think I am actually going to just keep my text white. And let's go ahead and turn a little bit of attention to the totals down here. There we go. For the totals, I'm going to use a darker blue and a white color. That's not looking half bad. However, let's go ahead and add some special customization to these columns. For our last year-to-date revenue, let's see how this looks if we, kind of soften up the blue a little bit that we're using there. We can even format the header the same way if we want. What this is doing is kind of drawing our attention over here to the year-to-date revenue column so that we can reference last year's year-to-date revenue, but of course it's a little bit less important now since that year is already done. And of course, we want to make sure that we're really adding particular emphasis over here to this percent difference. So I'm going to go to Cell Elements. I'm going to grab percent difference, and I'm going to add some conditional formatting to my background here. So for year-over-year difference 2, I'm going to go ahead and do, if you'll remember, what we did on the previous page by setting my middle value to 0 so that everything that is less than the previous year stands out with this orange. Everything that is around 0 is just blue, and everything that is higher gets this kind of vibrant teal. So now as we scroll through, we can easily see, which items are really selling more than they sold the previous year and which ones are selling less. So that could be helpful. I am noticing that I did use a different blue down here in my visuals, so just for consistency's sake, let's go ahead and mess around with the colors again. We want everything to align as well as we can. So you'll see that now this blue is much more similar to what I'm using down here. We can even update our column headers real quickly. And I think I'm going to run with that, actually. If we want to make this table even just a little bit more narrow, we can utilize different lines over here and make this a little bit smaller. One thing that I also really like to do when I'm formatting tables or utilizing any field where the field name is visible is I like to do things like just double clicking on product name in the table here and just removing that underscore so that it reads a little bit better and people don't have to spend any mental energy processing that little underscore between product and name. They just know exactly what they're looking at. Okay, all of that is looking pretty good. Now I'm going to go ahead and try to build a visual that is going to allow people to really, drill into which products are performing the best. I'm only leaving this here, even though it's a little bit redundant, because it could be a little bit easier to read. So sometimes it's okay to include two visuals that are somewhat similar to each other just to allow easier readability. I'm going to go ahead and grab this line chart here, and I'm going to kind of stretch it out. And we're going to change the type of line chart that we're using from a clustered horizontal to a column chart. I'm going to remove year-to-date revenue, and I'm going to grab my year-over-year difference 2 and drop that into my y-axis. And I'm going to change the name of this to just year-over-year difference. If somebody hovered over one of these items and saw year-over-year difference 2, that would probably just confuse them. So by changing the name to year-over-year difference, this reads much more cleanly. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my colors for my columns over here. And I am going to do the same thing with my conditional formatting. I'm going to grab year-over-year difference 2, set my middle value to a custom value of 0, my lowest values to orange, my highest values to green, and hit apply so that users can kind of see, there's this teal here, but there's something kind of happening over here. Now, whether or not you want to leave the data labels, kind of up to you a little bit. I am actually going to turn off the data labels to make everything a little bit easier to read. I'm going to turn my y-axis back on. I'm going to set my font to Den. Set that to white. I'm going to see if I can get away with just making this a little bit wider. And I'm going to change the title of this to year-over-year difference in revenue by product. And one other thing that you could do to make this chart a little bit easier to read, since this magic sand outlier really dominates the chart here, is you can add a zoom slider. And we're just going to go ahead and set the default for this down to about here. Sort of pull everything up. So that users can just play with this chart and read it a little bit more easily. Even though obviously the headline is going to be Magic Sand, Mr. Potato Head, and this barrel of slime, if we're interested in seeing, which products are really selling a lot more than they did the previous year. And, we can more easily kind of see over here the difference for Color Buds, Play-Doh Toolkit, Dart Gun, etc. And see that those are not selling as well as they did the previous year. So there's our product performance tab. Next, we're going to look at our store data. For our store page, we're going to mix up our layout a little bit different from the other pages. So far, we've gone very kind of horizontal with everything, especially the products page. For our store page, there's something special that I want to do with about, half, if not quite half of the report page here. So, by and large, we're going to be, washing and repeating some of this stuff. Again, we've already made a lot of measures that are going to tell us plenty of what we want to know, about the stores. So let's go ahead and head back over to our products. And let's go ahead and just grab one of our bar charts here. Let's drag this into place here. And the goal of this first visual is going to be to try to understand a little bit more about year-over-year performance across our different stores. So let's start by just having a year-to-date revenue by store name visual to just tell us which stores have had the best sales. Going to kind of shrink this down a little bit because I know I'm going to need this space later on. But after that, let's go ahead and replace our year-to-date revenue with our year-over-year difference too, so that we can look at which stores are performing much better than the previous year and which ones are selling less, which it looks like we have Aguascalientes 1, Guadalajara 4, and Monterrey 1 that are selling less in 2023 than they did in the same period the previous year. So that's obviously something that we would think is very important to highlight. But again, our conditional formatting is still tied to this visual. So let's go ahead and just click on our bars, go to conditional formatting. Let's change our gradient from pointing at year-to-date revenue to pointing at year-over-year difference 2. set our custom value to 0, our lowest value to orange, and our highest value to teal. And now we have what we wanted here. Let's go ahead and update our titles now for these two. So we have year-to-date revenue by store and year-to-date or year-over-year difference in revenue by store. And now, since we have, some geographic information here, it might also be a good opportunity for us to actually add some kind of a map to help us understand where these stores are located. So let's go ahead and grab city and add that to location. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here. One thing that I did notice is that it looked like we maybe had some items like Santiago and La Paz, but by and large, the stores are based here in Mexico. So I'm going to try to kind of zoom in on that area as well as I can. Let's go ahead and copy some of our formatting over to this map. And so currently this is just showing all of the locations where our stores are. If we want to add like different bubble sizes, that could be something that we look into here. Let's go ahead and grab year-to-date revenue and add that as a bubble size. Next, we're going to go to our map settings, and instead of road, we're going to change this to just the very basic light format, where we can still read everything, but it's just a little bit easier to make out the data. I'm going to set our bubbles to be a little bit larger than they were. If you want to, whoops. And if we want to add conditional formatting or something to our bubbles, obviously we can do that too. Let's go ahead and grab our year-over-year difference 2 formula and format this measure the same way that we have been so far. Just to make it a little bit easier to see where sales are down and where sales are up. And now that we have our map here, let's go ahead and give this a better title here. We can call this Revenue and Year-over-Year Difference by Store Location. I really wish that it would stop auto-zooming. Let's see if we can turn that off. And now, we may want to add additional information to this map so that when someone hovers over a specific store or city, they can see year-to-date revenue, maybe previous year revenue, and year-over-year difference. But we're actually going to take this a step further by building our first tooltip page. So I'll call this Store Tooltip. I'm going to hide this because this is just a tooltip. I don't want users to be able to click into this tab. I only want them to view what is on this tab by hovering over the map here. So I'm just going to hide it when it's online so that users don't know that this tab exists. I'm going to go over to my canvas settings and I'm going to click on page information. I'm going to say that I want to be able to use this as a tooltip. Power BI immediately kind of resizes this for me, but of course I can do whatever I want with this tab. So I'm going to go to canvas settings, and instead of using the tooltip, I'm actually going to make a custom tooltip size. And I'm going to make this about 500 high by 700 wide. And I'm going to go ahead and grab a background color. I'm going to go ahead and just use this kind of dark blue. Should work pretty well. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to recycle some of the other visuals that I've already made. So I'm going to go over here to sales performance, and I'm going to grab year-to-date revenue, previous year-to-date revenue, and year-over-year difference. And I'm going to just copy those and put them here. And kind of drag things into place a little bit. I'm going to select all of these, and I'm just going to make the font a little bit smaller than it is. Largely leave that untouched. For these two, since I already have a very dark background, I'm going to go ahead and set my transparency to 0 for these. If you want to give them, just a very slight outline, that's something that we can do just to kind of make it a little bit easier to distinguish between all of these. I'm going to change up the order just a little bit here. I'm kind of wrestling with exactly how I want these, just because I also want to make sure that I'm including information about the store for all of these items. Because obviously the way that tooltips work is I need these to filter as the user hovers over the different store locations in my map. So I'm going to keep the store name, I'm going to add the store location, except I added it to the wrong one, no problem. Next I'm going to add the year-over-year difference in revenue with year-to-date revenue and previous year-to-date revenue there at the bottom. I'm going to select all of my cards and I'm going to distribute them vertically. It's all looking pretty good, but however, while I'm happy with how my cards look, I am going to need a little bit more canvas to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and head back to my canvas settings, and I'm just going to use 1000 width instead of 700. Can probably get away with shrinking these cards down just a little bit. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now let's go over to products. And let's go ahead and grab year-to-date revenue by product. And since there are more products here than I could show in a tooltip, I'm going to add a top-in filter to my product name here, and I'm only going to show the top 10 products for year-to-date revenue. And the next visual that I'm going to add down here is going to be my bottom 5 based on year-over-year difference 2. And I'm going to swap out the year-to-date revenue with the year-over-year difference. Just to make these bar charts a little bit easier to tell apart, I am going to add a visual border as well to them that pops a little bit more. I may have gone too bright with that blue. Let's try maybe this one. There we go. And before I'm done here, I'm just going to update the conditional formatting on my bars. I'm going to set the custom middle value to 0. I'm pointing at the wrong measure again. Year-over-year difference. There we go. Okay, so now I've got my store tooltip I'm going to go ahead and add this tooltip to the general settings of my map so that when someone hovers over any of these stores, they can easily reference, okay, here we are at Mexicali 1. It's a commercial location. We have year-over-year difference, year-to-date revenue, previous year-to-date revenue, and we can see the top selling products and the products that have reduced year-over-year sales the most. So everything's working correctly. Now I'm just going to go back to my tooltip and I'm just going to fix some of the formatting things. Obviously, we don't want this to say first store underscore name. We just want it to say store name. We want it to say store location, year-over-year difference, year-to-date revenue, previous year-to-date revenue. That's all fine. We want the title for this chart to say top 10 products by year-to-date revenue. We want this one to say bottom 5 products by year-over-year revenue growth. And we're just going to go back and double check that everything is working correctly. Does appear to be. Okay. And now, the last thing that we're going to do on this page is going to require us to write a little bit more complex DAX. And that is, we're going to actually use this inventory table now. But how are we going to make that inventory table a little bit more useful? And to do that, we're going to go ahead and create a table that utilizes, our store names. And what we want to know, and I'm actually going to use my third measures table here, is we want to know how much inventory these stores have on hand. Even more useful, what we want to know is how much inventory for any of the given products these stores have on hand. So I'm going to turn this into a matrix, and underneath store name, I'm going to add my products so that for any given store, we can open this up and see, for Aguas Calientes 1, what inventory they have for Magic Sand, for deck of cards, for everything. Now what we want to know is that inventory enough? Or should we maybe be concerned about it? So something that might be really useful to someone who is jumping into this report could be to know which products are the top sellers and how many days of inventory for those products do we have on hand? Because obviously, if one product is selling like hotcakes, and suddenly we have stores run out of that product, well, then that means that we're not making additional revenue off of those products because we can't sell inventory that we don't have. So let's go ahead and try to calculate very quickly the amount of days inventory that we have on hand here. So let's go ahead and head back over to our measures 03 table. We've already calculated the amount of stock that we have on hand. The next thing that we're going to need to do is calculate some sort of an average daily units that we're selling so that we know about how many days the amount of inventory that we have on hand is going to last us. So the first thing that I'm going to do is let's just decide how far back we want to calculate the average number of units that we've sold. Maybe we just want to look at the last 30 days. First, I'm going to calculate max sales date as calculate max sales date for all selected dates. This should say September 30th, 2023. Hold on. September 30th, 2023. I may have made one mistake here. It does look like this is, currently just looking It's just filtering the date table. So it is, I'm getting like, September 1st, September 26th. What I need to do is change this to my sales table. There we go. Now I've got September 30th, 2023 all the way down. And now I can go ahead and remove this from my matrix. Now that I have an end date, I can calculate average daily sales for a rolling 30-day period. So let's calculate average daily units sold. I'm going to use the average X function. I'm going to tell Power BI that I want to calculate this for all dates in a given period. I want to calculate units sold for dates between, using my date column, the max sales date 30 days ago and the max sales date currently, which is September 30th. What this should give me is, on average, how many units I'm selling each day for each of these products at these different stores. And what that will tell me is how many days of inventory I really have on hand. So I'm going to divide on hand by my average daily units sold to uncover that for many of these products, I have less than a day of inventory on hand. For some, like these color buds, looks like I've got plenty. For things like, action figures, Barrel of Slime, I've got maybe a day. For this foam disc launcher, I'm selling about 10 units a day, and I have none on hand. So, that could be important for us to know. However, there's still a lot to process here. For some of these, maybe they're low sellers and I really don't care that I've only got a day or less of inventory on hand. Maybe it's not a big deal. Maybe I'm not all that concerned. So, let's go ahead and add another layer to this where we're going to rank all of our products by the amount of revenue that they have generated this year. So let's go ahead and have a year-to-date revenue rank formula that ranks all of our products by year-to-date revenue. And we'll be able to test whether or not this is working by just adding another table here. Let's add year-to-date revenue to that table. And let's add our year-to-date revenue rank just to make sure that this is working correctly. When we sort by year-to-date revenue rank, we can see Lego bricks, magic sand, everything seems to be working well. And now we can add some additional filtering to this table that we created. So let's go ahead and create a filter measure where we can filter matrix based on, I'm going to use an if function. If year-to-date revenue rank is less than or equal to 5, 1, and if not, 0. And I'm going to add this filter to my matrix by clicking on the matrix and specifying is 1. And this is going to make sure that I'm only seeing my top 5 sellers for all of the cities. And now what I really want to do is I want to find only the stores that have less than a day of inventory, for my top selling products. So let's go to days of inventory and let's add another filter for is less than 1. Now I can see all of my stores, and I can see the specific top selling products where they have less than a day of inventory. If I had to, try to figure out a way to make sense of the days of inventory and how to act on that, it might make more sense to start with my top selling products and identify which of those most revenue generating products my stores are about to run out of, so that if I'm working in operations or procurement or something, I can go ahead and arrange with those stores to order more of those products so that they can keep selling them and we can keep making more revenue. So now that I have that, let's go ahead and format our table so that we can be done with this part. I'm going to go ahead and head down to my row headers. I'm going to get rid of my stepped layout here. I'm going to expand all of my stores down to these products so that I know who to get in touch with. See what I can get away with as far as, dragging that matrix out so that there's no side-to-side scrolling required. So I'm just going to keep shrinking my other visuals down. I knew I was going to need about half of the page. No big deal. And because I'm super lazy, let's go ahead and just grab a copy of this table. And let's go ahead and copy its formatting over to our matrix. We can delete that table now. And okay, let's go ahead and finish formatting this thing. Let's go ahead and change our product underscore name to just product name. Change our store underscore name to store name. I'm going to look at my days of inventory and add special emphasis there. I want my lowest values to pop out the most. So let's try formatting it this way. And I'm actually going to remove my subtotals there. And it looks like I've got some zeros, kind of creeping in where I don't really want them. So let's go ahead and add some additional criteria to this days of inventory, similar to what we did earlier with the year-over-year difference, where if average daily units sold equals 0, then we don't really want to include those in our days of inventory calculation. So let's just go ahead and add logic here that says days of inventory cannot be blank. There we go. That's looking much better to me. The only thing that this visual now needs is just a title, kind of explaining what it's capturing. That looks pretty good to me. And okay, so now we've effectively got our sales performance report nailed down. There are some more advanced features that I want to circle back and walk you through. But for now, we've got a fairly basic start on our toy company sales report. The first page has our 2023 performance, how we're doing in 2023 compared to the previous year, how we're tracking towards our goal. Our products page, walks us through which products are selling like hotcakes, which ones are having a much better 2023 than 2022. With easy comparison, we can see which products are generating the most revenue, the most profit, which ones we're selling the most of. And we've even got a store performance page showing us which stores are selling more this year than the previous year. We've got a cool tooltip feature here on our map to help us understand more about where each store is excelling or struggling. And we also have, some additional help here letting us know which stores are low on inventory for some of our best-selling products. The only thing that we're missing from all of this is, are we going to hit this $8.5 million target? So for that, we're going to come back in a little bit more advanced DAX lesson to help us understand how could we sort of project out based on how we're doing so far in 2023 to understand if we maintain performance, what our chances are of really hitting that